We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you were choosing to listen to this episode. This is Jeff, and
this is Nelson.
And welcome to Silver Screen Bias. Today we are talking about, what movie, Nelson? What movie is on the dock today?
Today we're talking about Alien.
Alien.
Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979. Yes. Ranked 51 in the IMDb Top 250, with an 8.4 on IMDb and a 98% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, 94 also from the Rotten Tomato audience score.
So this just in, fun fact, from when you put the stats in your computer to versus today, it's actually gone down 1 rank.
Oh,
so
it's 52?
It's it's 51 now. It's gone up.
Oh,
it's gone up. Sorry, reverse that,
because
when I was checking IMDb today as of recording, it's number 50 and an 8.5 rating.
Interesting.
So, yeah, a movie from 1979 actively moving.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Climbing the charts.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Alien, Sigourney Weaver, one of her... not her first movie, but her first breakout movie.
Definitely her first breakout movie. I don't know of a movie that she's done before this, but I'm sure.
And it's Ridley Scott's breakout.
Oh,
film.
Was it?
Yes. Not his first, but it's his first breakout film, kind of putting him on the map, especially the start of a franchise for him as well, because he does multiple movies in this franchise.
Yeah. How many years after A New Hope was this? Do you know? Do you know off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head. No, I can look that up though as you go on to the next point here.
Because the intro shot is stolen directly from A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a teenager when both these came out. He went and saw A New Hope several times in theaters, which is, for me, hearing that is insane because I can hardly get him to see any movie twice, even in his house. But he saw A New Hope several times. He didn't see Alien.
2 years later.
2 years later.
New Hope was 77.
Okay. Yeah, he didn't see Alien because it was too scary, he said. But A New Hope, that opening shot is you've got the Rebels escape ship, followed immediately by the Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
And we probably have fans pissed because I got both those ship types wrong. But you've got this still camera as the ship flies overhead slowly, and this movie opened the exact same way.
Yeah.
And then the interior of the ship, you've got that run-down grubbiness. That was something that Star Wars brought to sci-fi. Is this lived-in universe? Not everything's polished and fresh.
Yep.
And then even some of the corridors inside that ship look like they were ripped, like set by set from the Millennium Falcon's interior.
Yeah.
So a lot of borrowed, a lot of inspiration taken
Inspired set
from
design.
A New Hope.
Feels that way, yeah. Okay, overall, what'd you think? Just first reactions. What'd you think about the movie? Was this your first time watching for the podcast? Is this your first introduction to the movie, or had you seen it before?
I have tried to watch it.
Okay.
At least once prior, I think twice.
Okay.
And both times, it wasn't doing it for me.
Right.
And honestly, if it hadn't been for this show, I don't think I would have given it another try.
Right.
It's just not my bag.
It had a slow start for sure.
Yeah. The first person dies halfway through the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we're not a movie reviewing podcast, but I've got some opinions. I don't think it aged well.
No.
Special effects in this movie compared to some other ones, like compared to just the way Psycho, I feel, aged well.
Yeah.
I think this aged worse than Psycho.
So, I will say,
previous episode,
the practical effects in this movie are very good. I think if you compare it to Star Wars, which was 2 years earlier, and almost exclusively practical effects, I don't think they compare. I think A New Hope delivers so much better
I absolutely agree.
on practical effects. And the scene in this movie that relies the most on practical effects is when Bilbo Baggins is decapitated and on the floor talking. Wrong character, right actor.
Wait, okay, I'm going to sound like a moron here. That's the actor that played
Bilbo Baggins, yeah.
in Lord of the Rings?
In Lord of the Rings, not The Hobbit. Martin
Yeah,
Freeman. I don't
Martin
think is
Freeman was. I knew it was Martin Freeman,
yeah, he was a young man at this point.
but that's the actor.
Yeah,
I didn't put that together.
yeah, same guy.
Fascinating.
And so that's the scene that relies the most on practical effects. And when they have him, I assume that they have him standing beneath the floor and his head through the floor, and that looks very real. But the shot immediately before and immediately after, where it's an effects head, not an actual human head, doesn't look anything like him. It's totally unconvincing. Of course, the Xenomorph, which I don't think they ever call him a Xenomorph in the movie. That probably isn't until the next one. The Xenomorph, that is terrific effects. It looks phenomenal.
Yeah, it was not scary to me.
No.
Not at any point was I like, what's...
My dad
like,
still won't watch it because he thinks it's going to be too scary.
I was, overall, I was disappointed in the movie. Just in entertainment. And in the entertainment portion of this review, talk, chatterbox, whatever, it was not thrilling or exhilarating. Yeah, I was underwhelmed. I liked it more than Clockwork Orange. I'll watch this one way more before I would watch Clockwork Orange. But I just thought as a storyline, it was very basic. And I will give a precursor. There was a movie done a couple years ago with Jake Gyllenhaal. I forget the name of it.
Prince of Persia.
Yeah, nailed it. No, it was very similar to like this.
Was it the sci-fi one where he can
It's him and a bunch of other people. They're stuck on a spaceship, and a alien type critter gets out and ends up destroying most of the people on the ship.
No idea.
And so my wife and I are watching this, and about halfway through, we're like, okay, we've seen this before. Granted, this was the original, but
Sure.
But this concept wasn't new to me. Going back to watching this movie, and I'm like, oh, except for the android part, that was probably the most like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Well, everything else was expected. Lone Survivor.
I have a gripe with the android gimmick.
Let me hear it. Or is that something that needs to be waiting?
No, that's fine. It was loose structure to this show. I think that the android was lazy writing.
Mm-hmm.
Until that moment, androids had never been mentioned in the movie.
Right.
So you didn't even know androids existed in this world.
Right.
And the crew, of course, they're surprised that he's an android, but the idea of androids is not foreign to them. They're like, oh, he's an android.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, even a line of, well, at least none of us are androids, or something like that earlier in the movie would have at least set the framework that, oh, androids also exist in this universe. And I don't know, just felt really lazy and gimmicky. Now, I will say it does provide some explanation as to why his character is so just on board with whatever Mother says.
Right.
But I don't know, it felt lazy. And then, of course, because of Star Trek: A Next Generation, having your lead science officer being an android is kind of something that I know that the Next Generation comes after the production of this movie, but still, it's just like, this is played out for me. So it just doesn't hold up anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm curious. I was watching some stuff in preparation for this episode. I was watching just some more information about the whole franchise in general.
Yeah.
And there's 2 prequels before this, I believe.
Oh, okay.
There's at least one, Prometheus.
I don't know the chronology of any of the movies.
This was the first movie created, but then they ended up, I believe there's at least one prequel, if not 2. But the timeline is, it's all over the place. And I feel like they made it more confusing than they did add value to the world building of this series.
Yeah, I will
'Cause
say,
watching the synopsis, I'm like, this is too much.
so the ship. Do you remember the name of the ship off the top of your head? I want to say Nicodemus, but that doesn't feel right. I think Nicodemus. Nostradamus.
Yeah.
Nicodemus, I think, is one of the ships.
Nostromo
from the Matrix.
or something like
Nostromo. That feels right. Yeah. So the ship Nostromo, I think that they did a really good job with that. It looks it looks real.
Yeah.
It feels authentic. The cathedral-like spires on it, they never explain what those are, but those are refineries.
Right.
That was what Ridley Scott intended them to be. And so some of the interior of the ship, when they're first looking for the alien, like you get the feel that this is grimy and gross.
Yeah.
Now,
Manufacturing.
having 4 refineries on a mining ship, and you have a crew of only 7 people.
Well, okay, so this does take place in future us. Like,
Sure.
So they were coming from a different planet, not Earth.
Right.
So there is
On their way back
there
to
is
Earth.
other colonies and stuff like so.
Oh, that's a good point.
So they could have been just in transition from one colony to another. Yeah, I don't know. They don't really elaborate much, but yeah, if you feel like that size ship, there should be more than 7 people.
There is a lot
Easily.
unexplained. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm of two minds on this because I also complain when movies set in worlds that aren't our own, when they use too much expository dialogue, that also feels inauthentic.
Right.
But there's just a lot in this movie that's unexplained in a way that feels lazy.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, the idea that they're a space mining ship, I think that's the most realistic reason for space exploration, as we're seeing with SpaceX,
Yeah.
and with tourism being the second most with the Blue Origin, right? We had NASA and Sputnik race to get to the moon, and then nothing happened in space travel for 50-some years. And why? It's because there's not much going on out there,
Yeah.
and there's no reason to go out there. But mining ore from space, that's the most authentic reason for space travel is not as we have in some sci-fi where it's protection, right? Protection against aliens, because they don't know aliens exist yet. Yeah. Space mining, which is what these guys are, that's the most authentic reason. And they actually, at the end of this movie, you and I both have the same kind of frustration that we're a show that focuses on what truth claims are made, and there's just not a lot in this movie.
There's not.
But there's enough in there that I think we can talk about.
Oh, and I pulled some things in my research to go in kind of deeper and deeper into just the biggerness of this movie stuff. I found some things that we could definitely talk about, and I wanted to step back real quick. And a lot of my notes, just citing my sources here. So a lot of these are trivia facts coming from IMDb.
Oh, okay.
So but one just to kind of,
if these trivia are not true, take it up with IMDb, not us.
So this one says that Sir Ridley Scott, he's a knight.
Oh, Sir Ridley.
Sir Ridley
Very
Scott
posh.
cites 3 movies as the shaping influence of this movie: Star Wars, A New Hope, which is very obvious; 2001: A Space Odyssey, which
we haven't seen yet. But
but that's
it's
Stanley
another top
Kubrick.
250, and it's Stanley Kubrick.
We just watched him, and then
probably his best known too.
And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974,
which I've
for
also
its
not
treatment of horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an interesting body horror in this when the xenomorph in its infant larval phase breaks out of John Hurt, I think is the name of the actor, John Hurt's chest. What that was supposed to do, what Ridley Scott was aiming for, was a discomfort specifically for the male audience, being forced to have some form of sympathy with women who are who are the exclusive ability to bear children.
Yeah.
Which medically there's a case to be made that the fetus is a parasite of sorts, right? Feasting off the mother's nutrients.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what he was going for here, and that's why it breaks out of his stomach specifically. Yeah, his abdomen. Now, perhaps because I already knew that when I saw it, it didn't really do that to me, but you didn't know that. Did you feel any discomfort that way?
No.
No.
I think because just like in Psycho when there was the shower scene.
Oh, you knew about this
This
already?
was the only scene that I knew of
Sure.
going in. Was this? I've seen it in many like Mojo videos, top 10
Sure.
clips or whatever. Like I've seen this clip before.
Have you seen it parodied in? I can't remember if it's Spaceballs or UHF, but one of them has it
What's
break out.
UHF?
Weird Al Yankovic's
Oh, I have not seen that one. I've seen Spaceballs, but I can't remember where the parodies happen. But I can't-
UHF is in my top 250.
Okay.
It doesn't belong in anybody's, but it's
this
in
has
mine.
probably been parodied more than just a couple times.
So
So
there's
there's this aspect of abdomen obtrusions.
Well, there's a specific parody where the Xenomorph breaks out, but then has a cane and top hat and does a "Hello, my baby, hello, my darling."
oh, I can picture that.
If that feels familiar, then it's probably Spaceballs.
That's funny. Oh man. All right. 20th Century Fox doubled the budget from 4.2 million to 8.4 million on the strength of Sir Ridley Scott's storyboards.
8.4. What's
So-
that in real today money?
That's a great question.
I'll look that up.
Yeah. So 8.4 million was the budget for this movie. And it's hard knowing what movies are capable of now, like, and this being kind of the first big special effects movie we've watched, it seems kind of lackluster. But yeah, so that's a fun fact. What's it equal today? Did you?
So 8.4, that comes out to 35 million today.
Wow.
So compared to the last two movies, which both worked out to about 10 million,
Yeah.
this is
Okay, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I guess
this is the largest budget movie we've seen so far.
correct. Yeah, but well, okay, so that kind of gets in. That's the basics. That's our thoughts and opinions. Any kind of behind the scenes information and stuff. So, what was the first bias that you were struck with in the observance of this movie?
So very early on, when the humans come out of their sleep pods,
Yes.
we see the two lowest ranking members of the crew advocating for equal pay
Yes. Okay.
on the grounds that they've been there the same amount of time, they work just as hard as everybody else,
Okay.
to which they're told, I believe it was the captain that responded with this, you get paid what you got contracted for, just like the rest of us. Now, at first, the capitalists cheer, the socialists whinge. But I want to explain kind of why, A, this is good, and B, I agree with it. Or maybe in the inverse order. You get paid what you're contracted for.
Right.
A contract is an agreement between you and a second person or party. And if you break contract, that contract's no good. You're only as good as you...
Null and void.
Null and void. Right? So they were contracted for a certain amount of money. The fact that they didn't know what everybody else was being paid is not the employer, in this case, the other
Right.
contract signer's responsibility. And secondly, pay isn't by labor, right? Karl Marx had the labor theory of value, that the amount of work put into something is what determined how valuable it was. But it's not. It's by scarcity and expertise.
Okay.
Labor specifically is by expertise. So these two guys are mechanics, and then we have a science officer, a medical officer, we have a captain. Presumably, these two mechanics, a lot easier to replace. Their knowledge, their expertise is not that scarce.
Mm.
And that's why they weren't able to compete for a higher pay. When they signed the contract, they're like, yeah, that's fair pay for what I do, right? Because that's what the going rate for their form of labor is.
Right.
Now, a really easy way to just kind of debunk this labor theory of value is, let's say, for example, that Martin Scorsese puts together his dream cast of actors and a dream crew of writers and a dream production team and everything, and makes the movie he's always wanted to make. And then I, on my own, work way harder than him.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to make the better movie?
Oof. I need to take a second.
Who's going to create more value from their movie for a production studio?
Right.
Right? It's just really obvious that, like, as much as hard work is a valuable thing, it is not the sole creation of value.
Right.
So,
Do you think that's a theme that plays out in the rest of the movie? Being that it's something that's kind of established right at the beginning. It's one of the first lines of dialogue.
yeah, it does play out with those characters a few more times. They have this conversation on repeat. But also, the whole idea of contracts is actually what really pushes the plot forward. Because when they first get this alert signal, the two guys that are advocating for equal pay, they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Because they're like, hey, this is just more work for us. We're not getting paid the same for our work as you guys are for yours. So, no, it's not worth it to us.
Right.
And they're reminded that if they don't investigate, their contract will be void and they will receive no compensation. Had they understood the risks, they'd likely have chosen no compensation because, no money's better than dead.
Yeah.
But they weren't under any penalty of force.
Yeah.
They were just under the penalty that they'd already agreed to that they wouldn't be paid.
Right.
Contract and voluntary contracts are a way better form of incentive than force.
Right.
Right? If you'd had somebody there with a gun saying you have to investigate, they might have investigated, but chances are they probably would have just tried to end up being the person with the gun instead.
Yep.
There wasn't coercion here, right? There was only what they had already agreed to.
Right. The scene where, okay, so they investigated the planet, and the one guy encounters the eggs, and then they come back.
Face hugger.
Right, the face hugger, and Sigourney Weaver's like, you don't let him in. He needs to quarantine, and the other guy trumps that.
Also contracts.
Right. Obviously, for the movie purpose, they had to break quarantine. But like in a realistic perspective or a realistic like operation of that wouldn't have happened. Like, right? Like, do you think that was a realistic moment between it doesn't matter, like quarantine's out the window, let us in. Like, that part for me was probably the most. That moment, that dialogue between Sigourney and the people outside was probably the most intense in the whole movie. Just because I'm like, yeah, don't let him in. Yeah. Like, because knowing what the rest of the movie's about, I'm like, don't let him in. Like, I feel like that was just a loose. That wasn't realistic, but it made so the rest of the movie could happen. You know what I mean? Like,
I think the captain and I think she was like first mate, demanding to be let in. I think that's very realistic. I think they would. A couple issues I had with it. They had a 24-hour quarantine. Quarantine definitionally means 2 weeks. Quarant means 14.
I did not know that.
So that's why quarantines are usually 2 weeks. So having a 24-hour quarantine is just kind of weird because like there's a lot of illnesses that take 2 or 3 days to germinate.
When you're talking about literally an alien substance. And you're just going to give it 1 day.
Yeah. Now, chances are they'd also have a quarantine pod.
True.
Right? So they'd be able to have all the services they need. And then the science officer lets them in, breaking contract. Mm-hmm. Now...
he's not going to get paid.
Now, I agreed that didn't feel authentic. It felt really out of place, and I didn't like it. But him being revealed later to be an android... and the fact that Mother, which we're going to get into this later, that Mother was very intentionally choosing alien life forms over human life forms.
Correct.
That, I feel like, is probably the best way to explain why he did what he did.
Yeah.
I just think that they went about exposing him as an android without any kind of foreshadowing was lazy. But
yeah, I agree. So that was...
There was a funny interaction when they're exploring the planet. The second mate or whatever her position is, she's just complaining, and the captain says, "Quit griping," and her response is, "I like griping." I laughed at that.
How true it is. Yes. Oh.
Now, interestingly, if their quarantine procedure clause, I had said that there was contracts involved here, and actually there's not. So the quarantine procedure was law, not contract. And so I'd written down here in my notes, if their contract had a quarantine procedure clause rather than a law, the captain would have respected it.
Yeah.
Because the captain, he can take the heat of breaking a law in quarantine, right? But he's unlikely to take the heat of everybody on his ship not getting paid.
Right. Yeah. So, next, bias. Have you come any more? This was a harder movie to pick things out, just being real.
There was not a whole lot of bias, because that wasn't this movie was not trying to teach you something about the world.
Right. The premise was pretty basic.
That's true. But even in
people trapped in a box,
being hunted,
alien form thrown into the box.
Yeah.
People trying to survive the box.
Yep.
Everyone dies. Sigourney Weaver lives.
And the cat.
And the cat.
Jonesy.
That's right. The
Now,
cat lives.
and this is kind of one of the things that I think is really interesting about storytelling, is even in this very tight story where we don't have, there is no moral to this story.
Right.
In order to drive the story forward in a way that feels authentic and real, they still have to make truth claims.
Right.
They still have to talk about motivation and incentive, and they find themselves making declarations about how contracts are better at regulation than laws are.
Right.
So I did find that particularly fascinating. Mother, which Ash is the name of the android. Ash talks about Mother a few times, and we were really left just wondering what it is. Until we meet Mother, I thought, and actually nothing outside of the movie tells us that Mother is not just their way of communicating with Earth.
Mm-hmm.
It's only because I looked into what is Mother.
Future.
Yeah. So Mother is an artificial intelligence which explains the lack of compassion for the crew, and why it classified the crew as expendable. Isaac Asimov is a science fiction writer. He wrote a lot of books that have been turned into movies that we're going to see.
Oh, okay.
Including Blade Runner, iRobot. I don't think iRobot's in the top 250, but and one of the big themes in his writing is the lack of compassion in artificial intelligence, because AI is purely utilitarian,
Right.
and from a purely utilitarian mode of thinking, humans are very replaceable.
Yeah.
This singular alien species, not at all replaceable. And already from the research Ash has done, its skin is more durable than most skins we've seen. It's got blood that's acid.
Yeah.
This is a terrific weapon.
The acid went through multiple
Layers.
stories.
Right? And
the
so
ship.
it's hinted at, I think Ash says it, that the alien is wanted for weapons production. And so Mother being an AI and Ash being an android removes their compassion in a way that I think is very honest and believable.
Mm-hmm.
Because if this was a governing body on Earth, sure, there are absolutely evil governments that prize resources over human life.
Right.
We see that all the time. But we don't tell those stories as much in it's an uncomfortable thing to tell stories about.
Right.
Clockwork Orange dealt with that a lot.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think that having it be AI, having it be a robot makes it very believable.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it very honest. Ash is a robot explaining his lack of compassion, as I mentioned, and his obedience to Mother and AI. If Ash were a human, that blind obedience to an artificial intelligence doesn't feel authentic either.
Yeah.
But I think having Mother as an AI, which they didn't actually explicitly say, but I found out, having Ash as an android, I think that grounds the story really well, even if the exposition of it was dissatisfying.
Right. Yeah, it felt like it was out of nowhere, but I agree with you that no one would pick robotics over human life when it came to making decisions for the furthering of humankind.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that.
And the truth of the matter is, yes, the human species absolutely does that.
Yeah.
It's just not a story we tell very often.
Yeah.
And then I have here written, this is part of Ash's, when he's on the floor, already been decapitated, but then Sigourney Weaver.
That was a cool scene.
Yeah.
That was
good.
The white face and the mouth moving. That was a pretty cool scene.
Yeah. And that's also probably one of the biggest truth claim sections of the movie as well. in his monologue, he says, "I admire its purity," talking about the alien, "a survivor, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality." Like this should have been written by Isaac Asimov. It feels very, and I'm surprised that Ridley Scott doesn't reference Isaac Asimov as one of his influences. 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't know the origin of that story. That might be an Isaac Asimov story. But I know that the only line from that movie I know is "Open the pod bay door, Hal." So we have a similar. I know that there's going to be a similar motif in there of this artificial intelligence betraying humanity.
Can you say that quote again?
Yeah.
From that moment in the movie.
"I admire its purity, a survivor, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality."
Wow. So it is a weighted statement. And it, oh man, there's some, we could spend some time on that.
For sure.
Like,
So I don't go in for utilitarianism.
Right.
But if you're a utilitarian, man, does that resonate.
So do you think those are accurate descriptions of someone who is a
Sociopath?
pure survivor, though? Like describing someone who's literally at the core just trying to survive. You think that they're throwing away morality? They're throwing remorse. I can see remorse. Obviously, I think, yeah, you got to do what you got to do. Well, then, yeah, I mean, maybe that would take morality out too.
Say
like,
absolutely. Like we have stories of the concentration camps in Germany.
Yeah.
We know glimpses of what happened there from the survivors. We know that put in those circumstances, things like Lord of the Flies happens.
Yeah.
People turn vicious when they're only surviving.
It's just the way that quote is stated, like, like it's removing three things that in a normal state we're like, yeah, these are good things. These are things we need to live by: consciousness, remorse, and morality.
Yeah.
But those things go when it comes to survival. It's just it's a very. I did not catch that line.
Yeah,
and that's
and not only that, not just morality,
heavy.
Delusions of morality.
Yeah.
Right. So from an android's utilitarian thinking, yeah, morality is delusional.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no reason that you should look out for your fellow man. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I think it's good that we do.
Yeah.
Now
that's what sets us apart from robots.
yeah. That and pants.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what separates us from the animals.
Oh man.
And then the last note I have written here, but we can still talk for quite some time on this.
I got some other stuff. Yeah.
Is that the company? Right. That's we don't get a name of the company. They just called the company. So the company is willing to sacrifice the lives of 6 crew and an android to secure the alien for weapons tech. They're a classic sci-fi trope of an evil mega corporation, effectively above the law and beholden only to themselves.
Yeah.
In other words, a government.
Yeah. Unlimited funds or creation of own funds and just unlimited resources and stuff, and just I mean, when you get that big of a conglomeration, it almost feels like they do have the same mindset that human life is expendable.
Sure.
Like, oh yeah, just fire them. We don't need that. We don't need that branch of the department anymore. Like, just like, as far as governments and stuff, you're like,
not even just hiring and firing, right? We look at what United Fruit did in Central America during the the middle of last century.
I'm not familiar with this.
With the help of CIA, United Fruit, which we now know as Chiquita Banana, overthrew several governments in Latin America so that they could purchase cheap land.
Really?
They also oppressed indigenous cultures there. Like they have a horrid history. I recommend you look into. So yeah, it's not just even the idea of hiring and firing. Like when organizations get to a scale, they lose their humanity, and they become above the law. Right? The mother. So Ash violates the law by violating quarantine because of his instruction from Mother. Right? That shows us that the company puts itself above the law.
Yep. Any more thoughts on that? I've got something for you.
That's all I've got, but I'm sure you're going to bring up some good points that I can riff on.
All right. Going back to some of my trivia and or fun facts about the movie pulled from IMDb. I came across this one and this one stood out. So I'm going to read the whole thing. Again, this is citing my sources. This is IMDb. I don't know who the submitter is, but here we go. During early development, Dan O'Brien and Ronald Shusett ran into a writing impasse while trying to work out how the alien would get aboard the ship.
Okay.
Shusett, if I'm saying that right, came up with the idea the alien F's one of them, which was eventually developed into the facehugger concept.
Yeah.
This method of reproductive via implantation was deliberately intended to invoke images of male rape and impregnation.
Yeah.
So both writers were adamant that the facehugger victim be a man.
Okay.
Firstly, because they wanted to avoid the horror cliche of a woman being depicted as the easy first target.
Sure.
Secondly,
Also, the black guy almost makes it to the end of the movie.
right, which is unheard of. Secondly, because they felt that making a female the casualty of a symbolic rape felt inappropriate. And thirdly, to make the male viewers feel more uncomfortable with this reversal of gender conventions, which that part you had mentioned.
Yeah.
But I feel like I didn't think of the concept of rape
Sure.
when the facehugger situation
either.
was going on, but I definitely felt an emotion of
Violation.
he's not going to be the same after this. Like if he
Even if he
survives,
lives,
if he survives, like he's gone beyond. Like that thing is in there.
And then I feel like they really cheaped out on that when he didn't remember any of it.
Right. Yeah. That could have been a whole. Yeah.
They could have had him be totally emotionally shook for the last 5 minutes of his life.
He was up until the thing ripped out of his body. Like, yeah, he didn't seem to have much trauma from that.
No.
That whole situation. Yeah, that could have been played up a lot more.
Yeah. He should have been like avoiding eye contact, not wanting to talk about it.
Like he was violated, like, for sure. And I definitely got that emotion when that scene was playing out. And I thought that was an interesting fact, and just some of the perceptions that went into, because they tried to, I appreciate back in the 70s, it's 1979, like they tried to stay away from what tropes were. And even back then, girls were always the weakest and, or the first to go, and then like you said, the black African American.
Yeah, black guys almost always go first in a horror movie.
Yeah,
and yet he and I this is. It's not so much that I want to see the black character die, and it's more just that I'm familiar with horror tropes. But the whole time I'm thinking like, oh, he's still alive.
You've seen Boy Meets World?
I know it. Yeah.
One of the later seasons, and this is sort of unrelated, but I think it's a fun connection. One of the later seasons, it's a Halloween episode. You know how sitcoms had all of those like standout holiday episodes, and the cast is stuck in the high school, and they're being tormented by some sort of spooky, ghoulish figure. Okay. And they
Old
realize
Man Jenkins.
That's a different one. Then they realize that someone makes the line like, only virgins live.
It's true.
And then one of the characters goes, okay, I'm going to get as close to being dead as I can without actually dying. And I just appreciated that. Like, there's that trope there, but they played it. They took it from a different perspective.
That's a cheeky. It's a cheeky way of.
I'm almost not a virgin, so I'm going to get very close to death, but I'm not actually going to die. And then they kill off Mr. Feeney, and everyone goes, all right, Mr. Feeney. I really appreciated that, and it wasn't until watching that show again as an adult that the humor really, I got the deeper level of those jokes that they played in. But Boy Meets World, it's a classic.
Yeah. Have you seen The Cabin in the Woods?
I have not.
It's terrific.
Okay.
It's a horror movie unlike many horror movies in that and this is going to spoil it for anybody. So if you've not seen Cabin in the Woods and you'd like to and you want to see it spoiler-free, skip forward a few minutes. Basically, the movie is set in a world in which horror movies are made in these using real-world things.
Okay.
So they get these teenagers to come to this cabin, and there's hidden cameras all there, and the production team of the movie sets in motion, like they have like a dozen different ways that the horror might start, and so they're all placing bets on how it's going to happen and stuff.
Really?
And the teenagers don't know they're in a horror movie. But there's all kinds of jokes about, the black guy dies quick, or the girls die quick, or the virgin lives, and that kind of stuff. So I'm only familiar with the virgin lives trope because of that movie. I don't watch enough horror movies for that.
I'm intrigued by that concept. I outside of this podcast, I don't go running towards horror movies.
Me either. As far as horror movies go, did you feel like this was scary?
No. No.
The only moment I had of legitimate tension where I was like, oh crap, was when she's on the escape pod and the hand reaches out and grabs her.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, we're in the home stretch of the movie, credits are going to roll any second, and then she's getting undressed to go in her sleep pod, and boom, suddenly there's a hand grabbing her.
Yeah.
I felt, and so the last couple minutes from there, that legitimate tension for me.
Yeah. The scene where he's in the one dude's in the big chamber and he's got there's the chains hanging from that and there is a glimpse when it's panning and you don't see the alien. There is a glimpse where he's in the picture, but you don't realize that's who it is. He gets the alien curled up in a ball and he's part of the dangling chains. So I didn't catch that while watching it, but I read it in the notes and stuff. And I thought that scene was probably the most suspenseful for me.
Yeah,
I knew Sigourney lived just because I knew she was in the sequel. Which maybe I wish I didn't know that ahead of time.
Sure.
But I did know that.
And the sequel, Aliens, is in the top 250.
It is, so we'll come back to that one inevitably.
Hopefully it's better than the first.
But I feel like just because like outside of Sigourney, I didn't know who else was safe.
Yeah.
So just being in that room with the chains, that scene was probably the most intense for me. And I'm gonna be honest, I was a lot more attached to the cat than I was to most of the characters, human characters. For some reason, I was like, no, not the cat. Oh, he can go. Not the cat.
I really expected Jonesy to die early.
Okay.
I thought when they went searching for the Xenomorph that they were going to find the dead cat.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. But, all right, I've got a couple more things. But
okay.
What would you rate this movie? Not in a scale of 1 to 10, but like, would you rate it R in nowadays terms?
PG-13.
Yeah, I agree.
Is it rated R?
It's rated R.
Yeah, I'd PG-13.
Violence was...
And then
it wasn't
Clockwork Orange, which I think is PG-13.
Should have been like...
Should be R.
X.
That's
yeah.
Something else.
Yeah, there was some language. There was some substances. There was cigarettes and stuff.
A lot of smoking, sure.
There was only a little bit of promiscuity at the very end. At the end when Sigourney was by herself, it was a little revealing.
It's sexy.
It's slim, not withholding much, but
it's intended to be sexy. They shot it that way on purpose.
Right, but I mean, I would say PG-13's safe. Would you recommend this movie? Would this be one that you would bring up and say, "Oh, you like"? Is there ever a conversation where this one could come up and you'd go, "Yeah, you should watch this"?
Honestly, I'd be more likely to recommend A Clockwork Orange than I would this.
Really?
I just didn't think it was that good.
I didn't like this, but I don't know if I would ever recommend A Clockwork Orange.
I mean, Clockwork Orange recommendation is going to come with a ton of disclaimers.
It's true,
but I feel like it's saying more that's true about the world than Alien does.
It just says more in general. And whether it was right or wrong, Clockwork Orange said a lot of things. Yeah,
so I probably wouldn't end up recommending this. If somebody said to me, "Hey, have you seen Alien?" Yeah. I'm thinking of seeing it. What do you think? I'd be like, "Yeah, see it. It's fine." Like that's the scale I give it. Fine.
Yeah. This movie was not enough.
I'm not going to recommend against it.
Right. Without the podcast, this movie is not enough for me to ever want to go into the rest of the franchise.
Yeah.
I didn't
even
hate
knowing
it.
it mixes with Predator.
I didn't hate it. Like it's not like I'm going to rip it up one side down the other. Like, and if people like it, I get it. I get why they like it. But it's.
I think that people that like this, it's a lot like people that like Rocky.
Okay. Yeah. Not a huge fan of Rocky.
In that it holds a very specific cultural cachet, I think is the word, and that it means something to people, and there's a lot of nostalgia and memories attached to it. And also it came out at a time where there was like 1 or 2 movies per summer. Mm-hmm. So to be the smash hit of the summer was a smaller task.
Right.
You know, Rocky gets made today, nobody's watching that.
Right.
If Alien got made today, nobody's going to watch that.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, technically, they're still making movies of both franchises.
Right, but only because the franchises themselves
exist
and are successful, and Hollywood doesn't like new ideas.
I agree. Let's see. Does it belong in the top 250?
No.
Nelson, would you put this in the top 250?
Nope, I would not.
I agree.
I wouldn't. I just don't think there's enough there.
Yeah. And as far as entertainment goes, I I'm not ranting or raving about any moment in this movie. No. It's fascinating that it's in the top 100. Like, it's in the top half of the top
50.
Yeah.
It's number 50 right now.
Yeah. Like, it just, that's unfathomable. Like, and I did not like A Clockwork Orange, nor would I recommend it, but I get why there's more people I get why there's people interested in it.
Yeah.
It's controversial. You can talk about it for days. This movie, like, I've got not much to say about it.
Yeah.
And it didn't impact me out even beyond just entertainment purposes.
No. In fact, so I watched this about a week or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
And until I reviewed my notes this afternoon, I was like, I don't even remember what the movie's about.
Right. Right.
It's fine. It's fine. It's not like, if I were to score it out of 10, I'd probably give it like a 4 or 5. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll have to circle back with this discussion whenever we inevitably do Aliens.
Yeah. It's
but
coming.
I don't have any more thoughts, Nelson. I don't have anything else to say about this movie. I feel like we're going to have more notes for next week's movie.
Oh, yeah. What is next week?
The Exorcist.
Have you seen it yet?
I have not yet.
Me either. I look forward to it. Well, I don't. I look forward to discussing it.
I have more weight in this movie of being scared or being more horrified than any of the previous 4 movies. Yeah, because this is movie number 4.
This will be our fourth.
Okay, so
fourth episode.
Previous 3 movies. Yeah. So this is the 4th one for October. Yeah.
Okay, well, join us in 2 weeks while we discuss The Exorcist.
Yes, and remember, hit us up, comment, message us, join the discussion in all of our social medias, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about this movie. If you loved this movie, tell us why.
Tell us why we're wrong.
Yeah, like we are not the infallible opinions of movies, but
we are the fallible.
We are the fallible, fully fallible.
The fallible opinions of movies.
Fallible boys.
Yeah, that's what they call us.
That's our band. Yeah. So thank you for listening, and see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening. We had a great time putting this together for you.
To join the conversation, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Silver Screen Biases.
And on Twitter at Screen Biases.
We believe in value for value, so if you found value in our show, we ask you to consider supporting us.
Links to our social media and support can be found in the show notes.